How far would you go to save your own child, especially when she's the one who warns you to act normal after being missing for a year? When two masked men forced me into a strange SUV and I found my daughter waiting, I knew there were secrets far darker than her disappearance. But I never expected my quiet, careful actions would one day bring down the very man everyone thought untouchable, my son-in-law. The morning air was crisp against my face as I rounded the familiar bend of Riverside Park's jogging trail. At 56, I'd maintained this routine for over a decade, 5 miles every Tuesday and Thursday, starting at exactly 6:30 a.m. My ex-wife Patricia used to call it obsessive. My son-in-law Victor called it pathetic. But routine had always grounded me, especially during the year since Maddie vanished without a trace. Franklin Harper, that's me, Frank to most people, civil engineer by trade, methodical by nature, invisible by family consensus. The kind of man who fixes problems quietly and gets overlooked at dinner parties. The kind of father who couldn't protect his own daughter from whatever darkness had swallowed her whole. I was checking my fitness tracker when the black SUV pulled alongside the trail. 2 men in ski masks emerged before I could react. The taller one grabbed my left arm while the shorter one pressed something hard against my ribs. "Get in the vehicle, Mr. Harper," the tall one said in accented English. "No noise, no trouble." My engineering mind cataloged details even through the panic. Ford Expedition, tinted windows, Texas plates, engine running. The shorter man opened the rear door and shoved me inside. That's when I saw her. Madeline Harper Delgado sat in the far corner of the back seat, thinner than I remembered, her auburn hair now shoulder-length instead of the long waves she'd worn at her wedding 3 years ago. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, but they were alert, focused, very much alive. "Daddy," she whispered and reached for my hand. I wanted to scream, to grab her, to demand answers. Instead, I squeezed back as the SUV pulled away from the park. Her fingers were cold but steady. "Listen to me carefully," Maddie said in a voice barely audible over the engine. "Go home. Act normal. Don't tell Victor anything about seeing me. Don't tell Mom. Don't call the police." "Maddie, what?" "Please." Her grip tightened. "Victor isn't who we thought he was. He's involved in something dangerous. People who help certain individuals cross the border under the radar. Not ordinary people, Daddy. Cartel associates. And if he knows you've seen me alive, we're both in serious danger." The shorter man turned around. "Time's up, old man." Through the window, I recognized the parking lot behind the community center, 3 blocks from my house. The SUV stopped. "Remember what I said," Maddie whispered as the door opened. The tall man, I'd later learn his name was Elias Cortez, leaned in as I climbed out. "You saw nothing today, Mr. Harper. You spoke to no one. And if you're thinking about playing hero, remember that accidents happen to men your age, especially ones who jog alone." The SUV disappeared into morning traffic, leaving me standing in an empty parking lot with my world completely shattered and rebuilt in the span of 10 minutes. I walked home on unsteady legs, my mind racing. Maddie was alive. Victor was involved in illegal border crossings for cartel members. And somehow, I had to pretend nothing had happened. That evening, Patricia called to remind me about dinner at Victor's house. "He's making that salmon dish you like," she said. "And Frank, try to be pleasant. He's been under a lot of stress since Maddie, you know." Victor Delgado lived in a sprawling ranch house in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. At 34, he'd built a consulting business that afforded him luxury cars, expensive suits, and the kind of social connections that made people overlook inconvenient questions. He was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, charismatic where I was reserved, successful where I was merely competent. "Frank," Victor greeted me with his trademark smile and firm handshake. "Still keeping up with those morning jogs? At your age, that's dedication, or stubbornness." He laughed, and Patricia joined in. We sat in his dining room, the same room where Maddie had told us about her engagement, where she'd smiled and glowed and seemed genuinely happy. Now I knew it had all been a carefully constructed lie. "You know, Frank," Victor said, cutting into his salmon with surgical precision, "I've been thinking about what you said last month, about hiring a private investigator to look into Maddie's disappearance again." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? I think it's time to let sleeping dogs lie. The police did their job. Sometimes people just leave, start over somewhere else. Maybe it's better for everyone if we accept that and move on." Patricia nodded sadly. "Victor's right, Frank. Maddie made her choice. We can't keep putting ourselves through this. Besides," Victor continued, his dark eyes fixed on mine, "you're not getting any younger. All this stress can't be good for your heart. A man your age should focus on enjoying his retirement, not chasing ghosts." My phone buzzed against my leg. Unknown number. Single message. Will be in touch. I excused myself to the bathroom and deleted the text, my hands trembling slightly. When I returned to the table, Victor was telling Patricia about his latest business expansion. I'm helping facilitate legitimate business relationships across the southern border, he explained. Cultural exchange programs mostly, bringing Mexican entrepreneurs to American markets. It's very rewarding work. The words sounded innocent enough, but now I heard the careful phrasing, the deliberate vagueness. How had I missed it before? That's wonderful, dear, Patricia said. Maddie would be so proud of how you've built your business. Victor's smile never wavered. She always supported my work, even when others didn't understand the complexities involved. He was looking directly at me. I drove home that night knowing two things with absolute certainty. My daughter was in mortal danger, and her husband was the reason why. The question was what a 60-year-old civil engineer could possibly do about it. The answer came to me as I sat in my kitchen, staring at a photo of Maddie from her college graduation. I would do what I'd always done, approach the problem methodically, gather data, and build a solution one careful step at a time. But first, I needed to understand exactly what Victor Delgado was hiding. The next morning, I skipped my run and drove to Maddie's old bedroom in Patricia's townhouse instead. Patricia had moved there after our divorce 2 years ago, keeping Maddie's room exactly as she'd left it, a shrine to a daughter we thought we'd lost. Frank, what are you doing here? Patricia opened the door in her robe, coffee mug in hand. I wanted to go through some of Maddie's things again. Maybe I missed something before. Patricia's face softened. Oh, Frank, we've been through everything a dozen times. The police went through everything. There's nothing there. Humor me. She sighed and led me upstairs. Just try not to make a mess. And don't take anything without asking. Maddie's room smelled like the lavender sachets Patricia had placed in the dresser drawers. I sat at the small desk where my daughter had done homework through high school and opened her laptop, the one the police had returned after finding nothing suspicious. But they hadn't known what to look for. I spent 3 hours going through email accounts, social media profiles, and cloud storage. Most of it was ordinary, work correspondence from her job at the marketing firm, photos with friends, complaints about Victor working late nights and weekend trips. Then I found the encrypted folder. It was buried deep in her file system, labeled only with a date from 6 months before her disappearance. Inside were screenshots of text messages, copies of bank statements, and a document titled Insurance Policy. The text messages were between Victor and someone named EC, Elias Cortez, I realized. They discussed packages, delivery schedules, and special clients from the South. The bank statements showed regular deposits to Victor's business account, always in amounts just under federal reporting thresholds. But it was the insurance policy document that sent a chill through me. Maddie had written a detailed account of Victor's operation, including names, dates, and locations. She'd discovered that her husband was facilitating illegal border crossings for cartel associates, not ordinary immigrants seeking better lives, but criminals fleeing Mexican law enforcement. The final entry was dated 3 days before she vanished. Victor knows I know. EC has been watching me. If something happens to me, look for the storage unit, key taped under the desk drawer. I felt along the underside of the desk until my fingers found the small metal key. Frank, Patricia's voice called from downstairs. Everything all right up there? Fine, I called back, pocketing the key. Just finishing up. I copied the encrypted folder to a flash drive and carefully covered my tracks. When I came downstairs, Patricia was waiting with a sad smile. Find what you were looking for? Maybe, I said. Patricia, I need to ask you something. Did Victor ever seem different to you before Maddie disappeared? She frowned. Different how? Secretive. Controlling. Did Maddie ever seem afraid? Frank, what kind of question is that? Victor loved Maddie. He's been devastated by her disappearance. Just last week he told me he'd give anything to have her back. But did you ever notice? Enough. Patricia's voice turned sharp. I know you never liked Victor, but this is getting ridiculous. You're looking for someone to blame because you can't accept that sometimes bad things just happen. Maddie made her own choices. I left without arguing. There was no point in trying to convince Patricia until I had proof she couldn't dismiss. The storage unit was in a facility on the outskirts of town. Unit 247 contained boxes of documents, photographs, and a detailed timeline of Victor's criminal enterprise. Maddie had been investigating her own husband for months before her disappearance, carefully documenting everything. Among the papers, I found business cards for several Mexican nationals, bank routing numbers for accounts in 3 different states, and a map of border crossing points marked with dates and times. There were also photographs, Victor meeting with men I didn't recognize, handshakes outside warehouses, envelopes changing hands. At the bottom of the last box, I found a letter addressed to me. Daddy, it began in Maddie's careful handwriting. If you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and you've been smart enough to find my insurance policy. Victor isn't the man any of us thought he was. He's been using his consulting business to help cartel associates enter the country illegally. Not ordinary people looking for better lives, criminals fleeing Mexican authorities. I discovered this by accident when I found encrypted messages on his phone. When I tried to confront him, he told me I was mistaken and that I should forget what I'd seen. But I couldn't. These people he's helping, they're dangerous. They're bringing their criminal activities across the border. I've been gathering evidence for months, but I'm scared. Elias Cortez, Victor's business partner, has been following me. Victor has become controlling and paranoid. I think he knows I know. If something happens to me, please don't let him get away with this. But be careful, Daddy. These aren't people who hesitate to hurt anyone who threatens them. I love you. I'm sorry I got us all into this mess. Maddie. I sat in that storage unit for an hour, reading and rereading my daughter's words. She'd been trying to protect us all, and we'd failed to protect her, but she was still alive, and now I had the evidence to help her. That evening, Victor called to invite me to dinner at his favorite restaurant, Casa Guadalupe, a Mexican place downtown where he conducted much of his business. I accepted, knowing it was likely a test. The restaurant was crowded, but Victor had secured his usual corner table. As we ate, I noticed the steady stream of men who stopped by to shake his hand or whisper brief conversations in his ear. Victor introduced me as Maddie's father to each of them, and I caught the way their expressions shifted. Pity mixed with something that might have been warning. Business seems good, I commented, cutting into my enchiladas. Very good, Victor agreed. I've developed quite a network of contacts on both sides of the border. Men who understand the value of discretion and mutual benefit. Halfway through dinner, Elias Cortez joined us. Up close, he was even more intimidating than he'd seemed in the SUV, broad shoulders, scarred hands, eyes that seemed to catalog potential threats. Frank, Victor said, this is my business partner, Elias. Eli, this is Maddie's father. Cortez's handshake was deliberately firm. Mr. Harper, Victor's told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope. Oh, yes. He says you're a very careful man, the kind who minds his own business and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. The threat was unmistakable, but I kept my expression neutral. I've always believed in letting people handle their own affairs. Smart policy, Cortez said, especially for a man your age. The world can be dangerous for people who get involved in things they don't understand. When I excused myself to use the restroom, Cortez followed. In the narrow hallway, he stepped close enough that I could smell cigarettes on his breath. Let me be very clear, Mr. Harper. Your daughter is gone. Accept it, move on, and stop asking questions that might lead to answers you don't want to hear. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, but just in case. Accidents happen, heart attacks, car crashes, falls downstairs. It would be tragic if something happened to Maddie's father, too. I returned to the table with shaking hands, but managed to finish dinner without incident. Victor was charming and solicitous, asking about my work and my health. To anyone watching, we looked like family sharing a pleasant meal. As we left the restaurant, Victor clapped me on the shoulder. Thanks for dinner, Frank. It means a lot to have family support during difficult times. I hope we can do this again soon. I'd like that, I lied. Driving home, I noticed the same dark sedan following me for several blocks before turning off. The message was clear. I was being watched. Back in my house, I sat in my home office and spread out everything I'd found, Maddie's files, the photographs, the timeline, the letter. The scope of Victor's operation was larger than I'd imagined. He wasn't just facilitating border crossings. He was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise that stretched across multiple states. But I was just one man, and not a particularly intimidating one. I needed help. I spent the rest of the night researching federal agencies that handled border crimes and immigration violations. By morning, I had a plan. It was time to call in reinforcements. The next morning, I drove to my longtime friend Darren Price's law office downtown. Darren and I had known each other since college. He'd been the best man at my wedding to Patricia, and the lawyer who'd handled our divorce with discretion and kindness. If anyone could help me navigate the legal complexities of Victor's crimes, it was Darren. Frank, he greeted me with genuine warmth, though I could see concern in his eyes. Patricia called yesterday. She's worried about you. I closed his office door and sat across from his desk. Darren, I need your help with something, and I need you to promise me you'll hear me out before you tell me I'm losing my mind. He leaned back in his chair. That's quite a preface. What's going on? I told him everything. The abduction, seeing Maddie alive, Victor's criminal enterprise, the evidence I'd found. Darren listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Frank, he said finally, if even half of what you're telling me is true, you're in serious danger. These aren't people who negotiate or compromise. They eliminate threats. I know, but I can't abandon Maddie. She's alive, Darren. She's being held by her own husband, and she's counting on me to help her. Darren pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. All right, first things first. We need to document everything properly. Chain of custody, authentication, admissible evidence, and we need to involve federal authorities. This isn't something local police can handle. We spent the morning organizing Maddie's files and creating a comprehensive timeline of Victor's operation. Darren photographed each document and created backup copies of everything. The storage unit concerns me, he said. If Victor discovers it's been accessed, he'll know someone is investigating him. I've been thinking about that. I want to install a small camera inside, something that will record anyone who enters after us. Frank, you're not a private investigator. This is dangerous. I'm a civil engineer. I understand systems and structures, and I'm the only one who can do this without raising suspicion. Darren sighed. At least let me research federal contacts first. We need to know who we're dealing with before we make any moves. That afternoon, I drove to the storage facility and carefully installed a tiny wireless camera in the corner of Maddie's unit. The device was motion-activated and would send alerts to my phone whenever someone entered. On my way home, I stopped at the border town motel that appeared in several of Maddie's photographs. The Desert Rose Inn was exactly the kind of place where people paid cash and didn't ask questions. I showed Maddie's photo to the desk clerk, claiming to be looking for my missing daughter. Yeah, I remember her, the clerk said. Pretty girl. Stayed here about a year ago with some guy. Paid for 2 weeks in advance, cash. She seemed scared, Jumpy. Kept asking about bus schedules. Do you remember the man she was with? Big guy. Mexican, maybe. Had tattoos on his hands. Real unfriendly type. Made sure I understood that their business was private. I thanked him and drove back to town with a heavy heart. The motel was clearly where Victor's associates had kept Maddie during her disappearance, probably to convince her to cooperate with their demands for silence. That evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. This time, instead of a text, someone was calling. Mr. Harper? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? My name is Agent Riley Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I believe we need to talk. My heart raced. I'm sorry. Who did you say you were? Agent Thompson. I work with a joint task force investigating criminal organizations operating along the southern border. We've been monitoring certain activities in your area, and your name has come up in our investigation. I don't understand. Mr. Harper, I think you understand more than you're letting on. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Federal Building downtown, Suite 412. Come alone, and don't tell anyone about this conversation. The line went silent. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone. Either the federal government was already investigating Victor's operation, or this was an elaborate trap. Given everything that had happened, I wasn't sure which possibility frightened me more. I called Darren. That was fast, he said when I told him about Agent Thompson. I was just about to call you with contact information for several federal agencies. But Frank, you need to be very careful. If this is legitimate, it's good news. If it's not, how do I verify she's real? I'll make some calls tonight. In the meantime, assume your phone is being monitored and be careful what you say. I spent a sleepless night going over every possible scenario. By morning, I'd decided that meeting with Agent Thompson was my best option. If she was legitimate, I needed federal help to protect Maddie and build a case against Victor. If she wasn't, at least I'd know where I stood. The federal building was an imposing concrete structure downtown. Suite 412 was a small conference room with no windows and minimal furniture. Agent Thompson was waiting for me. A woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She showed me her credentials and gestured for me to sit. Mr. Harper, I'm going to be direct with you. We know your daughter is alive. We know she's being held against her will, and we know her husband is running a criminal enterprise that facilitates illegal border crossings for cartel associates. I stared at her. You know all that? We've been investigating Victor Delgado's operation for 8 months. Your daughter's disappearance was what first brought him to our attention. We suspected she'd discovered his activities and been eliminated to ensure her silence. Learning that she's alive changes our approach significantly. How do you know she's alive? Because 3 days ago, someone accessed a storage unit registered under her name and removed several boxes of documents. The facility has security cameras. My stomach dropped. You've been watching me. We've been watching everyone connected to this case. Mr. Harper, your daughter gathered excellent evidence, but she's not trained in federal law enforcement procedures. Much of what she collected wouldn't be admissible in court. We need someone on the inside who can help us gather legally sound evidence. You want me to spy on my son-in-law. We want you to help us save your daughter and put a dangerous criminal organization out of business. Victor Delgado isn't just facilitating border crossings. He's helping wanted criminals escape Mexican law enforcement and establish new criminal enterprises in American cities. The people he's helping move across the border have been tied to extortion, human trafficking, and serious criminal activity in at least 6 states. Agent Thompson opened a file folder and showed me photographs, surveillance images of Victor meeting with men I recognized from Maddie's documentation, as well as others I'd never seen. This is Joaquin Mendoza, she said, pointing to a heavyset man with distinctive facial scars. Wanted in Mexico for running a kidnapping ring. Victor helped him cross the border 6 months ago. Mendoza is now operating in Houston. She showed me another photo. Carlos Vega, suspected of running a human trafficking network. Victor brought him across 3 months ago. He's been linked to the disappearance of at least 12 young women in the Phoenix area. The scale of Victor's operations was staggering. This wasn't just about unlawful border crossings. He was bringing in dangerous individuals and helping them set up criminal networks in American cities. What do you need from me? I asked. Access. Victor trusts you enough to include you in family gatherings and social events. We need you to document his activities, record conversations, and help us identify his associates. Most importantly, we need you to help us locate your daughter so we can extract her safely when we move against the organization. And in return? We protect both of you. We put Victor and his associates in federal prison for a very long time, and we dismantle a criminal network that's been operating with impunity for over 2 years. Agent Thompson handed me a small device that looked like a pen. Recording device. Voice-activated, 12-hour battery life. We'll also provide you with a secure phone for emergency contact. How do I know I can trust you? Because, Mr. Harper, we're the only chance your daughter has. Victor's operation is expanding. The people he's working with don't tolerate loose ends indefinitely. If we don't move soon, Maddie becomes a liability they can't afford to keep alive. I took the recording device. What's the timeline? We need admissible evidence within the next few weeks. Victor is planning something big. We've intercepted communications about a major shipment coming across the border next month. We want to catch him in the act with enough evidence to guarantee convictions. As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Storage unit camera triggered. 2 men, 20 minutes ago. Be careful. Victor knew someone was investigating him. The clock was ticking. That evening, I attended a charity fundraiser at the community center. One of those local events where successful businessmen write large checks and network over cocktails and catered appetizers. Victor was one of the main sponsors, and Patricia had insisted I attend to show family support. The recording device felt heavy in my jacket pocket as I watched Victor work the room. He was in his element, charming donors, making jokes, playing the role of grieving widower with just the right amount of tragic dignity. Several people approached me to offer condolences about Maddie, and I had to resist the urge to tell them she was alive and being held prisoner by the man they were praising. Frank! Victor spotted me near the silent auction tables and approached with his trademark smile. I'm so glad you came. Maddie would have loved this event. She always supported children's charities. She had a good heart, I managed. The best. You know, I've been thinking about what we discussed at dinner, about accepting that she's gone and moving forward. I think it's time we both focused on honoring her memory instead of dwelling on what we can't change. I activated the recording device. What did you have in mind? Well, I'm expanding my business significantly. New partnerships, larger operations. I could use someone with your engineering background to help with logistics and planning. It would be good for both of us, keep us busy, give us a purpose. What kind of logistics? Victor's eyes gleamed. Transportation planning, mostly. I'm helping facilitate the movement of people and resources across the southern border. There are many Mexican entrepreneurs who need assistance establishing themselves in American markets, and the process can be quite complex. Sounds interesting? It is. Very rewarding work. Of course, it requires absolute discretion. The people I work with value their privacy, and they don't appreciate questions or interference. Elias Cortez appeared at Victor's elbow, as if summoned. Mr. Harper, he said with a nod. Enjoying the party? Very much. Victor was just telling me about his business expansion. Cortez and Victor exchanged a look. Victor's business has been very successful, Cortez said carefully. He has a gift for bringing the right people together at the right time. The key, Victor said, is understanding that some relationships operate outside conventional channels. My clients often have urgent needs that can't wait for bureaucratic processes. They're willing to pay premium prices for expedited services. Expedited services? Border crossings, primarily. You'd be amazed how many successful Mexican businessmen need to relocate quickly due to political instability or business disputes. They arrive with significant capital and ambitious plans, but they need someone who understands both sides of the border to help them establish themselves. I nodded, as if this made perfect sense. And they're willing to pay well for that kind of assistance? Very well. In fact, I'm expecting a group of particularly high-value clients next month. 12 men with substantial resources who need to establish operations in Texas, Arizona, and California. The logistics alone will be worth $250,000. Cortez shot Victor a warning look, but Victor seemed intoxicated by his own success and the admiring crowd around him. Of course, Victor continued, lowering his voice, the work requires a certain tolerance for legal ambiguity. My clients can't always wait for official paperwork to be processed. Sometimes we have to be creative about documentation and transportation methods. Creative how? Well, for example, next month's group will be crossing at 3 different points along a 100-mile stretch of border. They'll travel in small groups, use established routes that avoid official checkpoints, and meet at predetermined safe houses before continuing to their final destinations. This was exactly what Agent Thompson needed: specific dates, locations, and methods. I kept my expression neutral, as Victor essentially confessed to running a sophisticated human smuggling operation. It sounds complex, I said. It is, but that's what makes it profitable. Anyone can help ordinary immigrants cross the border. It takes real expertise to handle clients with specific security needs and substantial resources. The conversation was interrupted by the fundraiser's main speaker, but I'd already recorded enough to provide federal authorities with detailed information about Victor's upcoming operation. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing near the dessert table when someone touched my elbow. I turned to see Maddie. She was wearing a dark wig and sunglasses, dressed as one of the catering staff. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. "Don't react," she whispered, pretending to refill the coffee service. "Meet me in the parking garage behind the building in 10 minutes. Level B, northeast corner." She moved away before I could respond, but not before pressing a small piece of paper into my palm. I waited exactly 10 minutes, then excused myself and walked to the parking garage. Maddie was waiting in the shadows between 2 concrete pillars, no longer wearing the wig. She looked thin and exhausted, but her eyes were alert. "Daddy," she said, and I had to resist the urge to grab her and never let go. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, but we don't have much time. Victor thinks I'm at a safe house across town, but I convinced Eli's men that I needed medical supplies from a pharmacy. I have maybe 20 minutes before they expect me back." She handed me a leather ledger. This contains records of every transaction Victor's made in the past year. Names, dates, amounts, locations. He keeps it in a safe in his office, but I managed to photograph every page. I flipped through the ledger, page after page of handwritten entries documenting payments, border crossing schedules, and client information. It was a complete record of Victor's criminal enterprise. "Maddie, the federal agents—" "I know. Agent Thompson contacted me last week. She's been trying to build a case, but she needed inside access to Victor's operation. That's why I've been cooperating, gathering evidence, documenting everything." "You've been working with them this whole time?" "Since about a month after my disappearance. Victor found out I knew about his operation and threatened that I wouldn't survive if I didn't cooperate. But Eli made a mistake. He let me overhear a phone conversation about bringing in federal witnesses. I realized they were planning to get rid of me anyway once the next major shipment was complete." "The 12 men Victor mentioned tonight?" "You heard about that?" "Yes. It's Victor's largest operation yet. And once it's finished, he plans to move his base of operations to Mexico. He can't risk leaving witnesses behind." A wave of icy fear swept through me. "Maddie, we have to get you away from here." "Not yet. Agent Thompson needs more evidence to guarantee convictions. If Victor escapes or gets a light sentence, he'll hunt us both down. We have to finish this properly." She pulled out a small key. "This opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown, box 247. Inside are backup copies of everything. Financial records, photographs, recorded conversations. If something happens to me, make sure Agent Thompson gets that key." "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Daddy, I need you to promise me something. Next week, Victor is hosting an anniversary party at the church. It's the 3rd anniversary of our wedding. He's planning to use the event to introduce his Mexican contacts to local politicians and businessmen. Agent Thompson wants to record the entire thing, but she needs someone inside to plant surveillance equipment. I'll do it. It's dangerous. If Victor suspects anything, let me worry about Victor. You just focus on staying safe. Maddie hugged me quickly. I love you, Daddy, and I'm sorry for all of this. You have nothing to apologize for. You're the bravest person I know. She disappeared into the shadows, and I drove home with the ledger hidden under my car seat. That night, I photographed every page and uploaded the images to a secure server Agent Thompson had provided. The next morning, I met with Agent Thompson and Darren at a coffee shop outside town. Agent Thompson reviewed the ledger copies with obvious satisfaction. This is exactly what we needed, she said. Financial records, client names, operational details. Combined with the recordings from last night, we have enough evidence to obtain warrants and coordinate a multi-state operation. What about Maddie? I asked. She's been incredibly brave, but she's also in immediate danger. Victor's planning to eliminate her after next month's operation. We need to move before then. The anniversary party, I said. Maddie mentioned it. Agent Thompson nodded. Victor's using the event to cement relationships with corrupt officials and potential new clients. If we can record those conversations and document the criminal conspiracy, we'll have enough evidence to dismantle the entire network. What do you need me to do? Plant surveillance equipment in the church, record conversations, and help us identify Victor's associates. Most importantly, help us coordinate Maddie's extraction during the confusion of the arrests. Darren had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now he leaned forward. Frank, once you do this, there's no going back. Victor will know you betrayed him. Even if he goes to prison, he has associates who might seek revenge. I understand the risks. Agent Thompson handed me a small case. Surveillance equipment, wireless cameras, and audio devices. They're designed to look like ordinary objects, a pen, a phone charger, a key fob. Plant them in the church before the event, and we'll have real-time audio and video of everything that happens. When do we move? The anniversary party is in 5 days. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement and have teams in place around the church. When Victor and his associates incriminate themselves on camera, we'll move in for arrests. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I visited the church during off hours and planted the surveillance devices in strategic locations, behind the altar, near the guest book table, in the fellowship hall where Victor planned to host the reception. Each device was virtually invisible, designed to capture both audio and video from multiple angles. Meanwhile, I maintained my normal routine, attending family dinners and social events as if nothing had changed. Victor seemed relaxed and confident, occasionally making jokes about my improved attitude and acceptance of reality. If only he knew. The night before the anniversary party, I received a final message from Agent Thompson. All teams in position, recording equipment active, stay calm, document everything, and trust the process. I sat in my kitchen, looking at a photo of Maddie from her real wedding day 3 years ago. She'd been so happy then, so full of hope and love. Now I knew it had all been built on lies and criminal enterprise. But tomorrow, we would end it. Tomorrow, Victor Delgado would learn that Frank Harper was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The morning of the anniversary party dawned clear and bright. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Maddie's wedding 3 years ago, and drove to the church early to help with setup. Victor had asked family members to arrive 2 hours before the guests to ensure everything was perfect. Frank, Victor greeted me in the church parking lot, looking relaxed and confident in an expensive charcoal suit. Thank you for coming early. I know this isn't easy for any of us, but I think it's important to celebrate the good times we had with Maddie. Patricia was already inside, arranging flowers and directing the catering staff. She hugged me when I entered, and I could see she'd been crying. I keep expecting her to walk through those doors, she whispered. 3 years ago, she was so beautiful, so happy. She was, I agreed, thinking of my daughter hidden away somewhere in the city, risking her life to gather evidence against the man we'd all trusted. The church looked exactly as it had during Maddie's wedding, white roses and baby's breath, candles flickering in tall brass holders, the same altar where she'd promised to love and honor Victor for a lifetime. The irony was almost unbearable. I spent the morning helping arrange tables and chairs, all while ensuring the surveillance equipment remained hidden and functional. My phone buzzed periodically with status updates from Agent Thompson. Audio clear. Video feeds active. Teams in position. As guests began arriving, I recognized several faces from Victor's business dinners and social events. But there were also new faces. men in expensive suits who spoke quietly in Spanish and seemed to catalog every exit and entrance. These were clearly Victor's Mexican associates, the cartel members he'd been helping establish operations in American cities. "Frank," Victor appeared at my elbow as I watched the growing crowd, "I'd like you to meet some business associates. Gentlemen, this is Franklin Harper, Maddie's father. Frank, these are some of the entrepreneurs I've been telling you about." The introductions were carefully choreographed. Each man shook my hand and offered condolences about Maddie, but their eyes were cold and calculating. These weren't entrepreneurs. They were criminals evaluating potential threats. "Mr. Harper," one of them said in accented English, "Victor speaks very highly of you. He says you understand the importance of family loyalty and discretion." "I try to mind my own business," I replied. "Very wise. In our line of work, curiosity can be dangerous." As the afternoon progressed, I moved through the crowd with the recording device active, capturing conversations about border crossings, territorial disputes, and planned criminal operations. Victor's associates spoke freely, apparently confident that the church setting and family atmosphere provided security from law enforcement surveillance. I was near the fellowship hall when I heard Victor addressing a small group of his closest associates. "Gentlemen," he said, raising a glass of champagne, "today marks not just the anniversary of my marriage to Maddie, but the beginning of a new phase of our business relationship. Next month's operation will be our largest and most profitable yet." Joaquin Mendoza, the kidnapping suspect Agent Thompson had shown me in photographs, nodded approvingly. 12 of our most valuable associates, each paying premium rates for expedited crossing and establishment services. "The logistics are complex," Victor continued, "but the profits will be substantial. $250,000 in crossing fees, plus ongoing percentages from their American operations. Within 6 months, we'll have established criminal enterprises in 6 major cities." Carlos Vega, the suspected human trafficker, raised his own glass to profitable partnerships and expanded territories. I moved closer, ensuring the recording device captured every word. "Of course," Victor said, his voice dropping. "Success requires eliminating potential complications, loose ends that might compromise future operations." "The woman," Mendoza asked, "will be handled after next month's crossing. She served her purpose, but she knows too much to remain a long-term asset." They were talking about making Maddie disappear. My hands trembled as I kept recording, but I forced myself to stay calm and continue listening. "What about the father?" Vega gestured in my direction. Victor glanced over at me and smiled. "Frank's harmless. A broken old man who's accepted reality. He won't be a problem." If only he knew that the broken old man was recording every word and transmitting it directly to federal agents positioned around the building. The formal ceremony began at 4 o'clock. Victor stood at the same altar where he'd married Maddie and delivered a speech about love, loss, and the importance of cherishing memories. He was a gifted performer. Several guests were moved to tears by his apparent grief and devotion. "Maddie was the light of my life," he said, his voice breaking convincingly. "Though she's no longer with us, her spirit lives on in the love we shared and the dreams we built together. Today, I want to honor her memory by committing myself to the work that was important to her, helping people build better lives, creating opportunities for those who need them most." The crowd applauded, unaware that Victor's talk of helping people actually meant moving dangerous offenders across international borders. As the reception began, I noticed increased activity among Victor's security team. Elias Cortez was speaking urgently into a phone, and several of the Mexican associates seemed agitated. Something was wrong. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Thompson. "Maintain position. Possible compromise. Stay calm." Victor approached me as I stood near the gift table. "Frank, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Have you been in contact with any law enforcement agencies recently? FBI, Border Patrol, anyone like that?" My heart raced, but I kept my expression puzzled. Law enforcement? Why would I be talking to law enforcement? Someone's been asking questions about my business, making inquiries about border crossings and client relationships. The timing is suspicious. "Victor, I don't understand what you're talking about. What kind of questions?" He studied my face carefully. "Maybe I'm being paranoid. This business makes you cautious about everyone and everything. If someone's bothering you, maybe you should call the police." Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The police can't help with this kind of problem, Frank. Some situations require more direct solutions." Cortez appeared at Victor's shoulder. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Now." They moved away, speaking in urgent whispers. I activated the recording device and tried to get close enough to hear their conversation, but they'd positioned themselves in a corner away from other guests. My phone buzzed again. Teams moving, maintain position, document everything. The church bells began chiming 6 o'clock as Victor returned to the crowd. He seemed calmer now, his confident smile restored. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, raising his champagne glass, "if I could have your attention for a moment, I'd like to propose a final toast to my beloved wife, Madeline Harper Delgado." The crowd gathered around him, glasses raised. I positioned myself where the surveillance cameras would capture everyone's faces. 3 years ago, Victor began, Maddie and I stood in the same spot and promised to love and protect each other no matter what challenges we might face. Today, I want to reaffirm that commitment. Maddie may not be physically present, but she remains the center of my world, and everything I do is in service of the dreams we shared. He paused, looking directly at me. Some people have suggested that I should move on, forget the past, start over. But I believe in loyalty, in keeping promises, in protecting the people you love no matter what the cost. The words sounded noble, but I heard the threat underneath. Victor knew someone was investigating him, and he was sending a message about what happened to people who betrayed his trust. "So here's to Maddie," he concluded, "and to the future we're building in her honor." The crowd drank, applauded, and began moving toward the exit. The anniversary party was ending, but I knew the real drama was just beginning. As I walked toward my car, my phone rang. Agent Thompson. "Frank, we need you to go home and pack a bag. Tonight? We're moving faster than planned." "What's happened?" "Victor's planning to eliminate Maddie tomorrow morning. We intercepted communications about a final cleanup before next month's operation. We can't wait any longer." "Where is she?" "Safe house on the east side of town. We're extracting her tonight, but we need your help to coordinate the operation." I drove home with my hands shaking. Tomorrow was supposed to be the day we gathered final evidence and coordinated arrests. Instead, it had become a race to save my daughter's life. But as I packed my emergency bag, I realized something important. We had everything we needed. Victor's recorded confessions, the financial records, the surveillance footage from tonight's party, and testimony from federal witnesses would be more than enough to convict him and his associates. The careful, methodical approach had worked. Franklin Harper, the overlooked civil engineer, had outmaneuvered the criminal mastermind who'd underestimated him. Tomorrow, Victor Delgado would learn that the biggest mistake of his criminal career had been threatening my daughter. I arrived at the church the next morning to find it transformed. What had been a celebration venue 12 hours earlier was now the staging ground for a federal law enforcement operation. Unmarked vans filled the parking lot, and agents in tactical gear moved with quiet efficiency. Agent Thompson met me at the side entrance. "Everything's in place. Maddie's safe. We extracted her from the safe house at 3 a.m. without incident. Victor and his associates are gathering here for what they think is a private business meeting to finalize next month's operation." "They're coming back to the church?" "Victor chose it specifically because he thinks it's the last place law enforcement would expect a criminal meeting. He's also bringing his Mexican associates to show them the level of community support and respectability he's built. It's perfect for our purposes." Through the church windows, I could see agents installing additional recording equipment and positioning cameras. Everything Victor and his associates said or did would be documented with federal quality evidence. "What's my role?" "Victor's expecting you to attend this meeting. He wants family present to demonstrate his legitimate community connections. You'll be wearing a wire and helping us identify everyone present. Most importantly, you'll be the one to trigger the final phase." Agent Thompson handed me a small device that looked like a hearing aid. "Audio transmitter. We'll hear everything in real time. When I give you the signal, you'll stand up and read this statement." She handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it and read my daughter's words, a detailed account of Victor's crimes, her forced captivity, and the evidence she'd gathered. At the bottom, in Maddie's handwriting, "My father, Franklin Harper, helped me document these crimes and gather evidence for federal authorities. She wants the world to know that you saved her," Agent Thompson said quietly. At 10 o'clock, Victor's associates began arriving. I recognized most of them from the previous evening, but there were also new faces, men in expensive suits who carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to danger and authority. These were clearly senior cartel figures, the kind Victor specialized in helping set up operations in the United States. Victor greeted me warmly as I entered the fellowship hall. "Frank, thank you for coming. I know business meetings aren't usually your thing, but I wanted family present for this important discussion." "I appreciate being included. Today marks the beginning of a new phase of growth for our organization. My associates here represent substantial investment capital and ambitious expansion plans. With their backing, we'll be able to help even more people achieve their American dreams. The meeting began with Victor presenting detailed plans for the upcoming border crossing operation. Using a large map and laser pointer, he outlined routes, timing, safe houses, and transportation logistics. It was a masterclass in criminal enterprise management, and every word was being recorded by federal agents. 12 high-value clients, Victor explained to the assembled group, each paying $200,000 for expedited crossing and establishment services. Total revenue, $2.4 million. After expenses and partner percentages, net profit will exceed $1 million. Joaquin Mendoza raised his hand. What about security concerns? Recent law enforcement activity in the region? Minimal risk, Victor replied confidently. We have excellent intelligence about patrol schedules and checkpoint locations. More importantly, we have established relationships with key officials who ensure our operations proceed without interference. Corruption? Asked Carlos Vega. Practical business relationships, border patrol supervisors, local sheriffs, even some federal agents. Everyone has a price, and we've invested heavily in maintaining those relationships. I activated the recording device as Victor essentially confessed to bribing federal law enforcement officers. Around the room, his associates nodded approvingly and took notes. What about the woman? Mendoza asked. The potential security risk we discussed yesterday? Victor's expression darkened. That situation will be resolved this afternoon, permanently. She served her purpose, but she knows too much to remain a long-term asset. And the father? Victor glanced at me with what might have been pity. Frank's been useful for maintaining appearances, but he's not a long-term consideration. After this operation, we'll be relocating our base of operations to Mexico anyway. They were discussing getting rid of both Maddie and me with the casual indifference of people planning a business lunch. I forced myself to remain calm and continue recording. The meeting continued for another hour, with detailed discussions of money laundering, territorial expansion, and coordination with other criminal organizations. Victor's operation was far larger and more sophisticated than even federal authorities had suspected. Finally, Victor stood to address the group. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your confidence and partnership. 3 years ago, I was a small-time facilitator helping ordinary immigrants cross the border. Today, we're running a multi-million-dollar enterprise that spans 6 states and connects American markets with Mexican criminal organizations. He raised a glass of water in a mock toast. To profitable partnerships, expanded territories, and the elimination of anyone who threatens our success. Through the window, I saw Agent Thompson signal from across the parking lot. It was time. I stood up slowly, the statement in my hand. Every eye in the room turned to me. Victor, I said in a clear, steady voice, I have something to say. He smiled indulgently. Of course, Frank. Family should always have a voice in important decisions. I unfolded the paper and began reading. My name is Franklin Harper. For the past 3 months, I have been working with federal law enforcement to document the criminal activities of Victor Delgado and his associates. Victor's smile vanished. Around the room, chairs scraped as his associates tensed and moved toward hidden tools. My daughter, Madeline Harper Delgado, has been held against her will by her husband for over a year after uncovering his criminal enterprise. She has been forced to cooperate with his illegal activities under constant threats to her safety. Frank, Victor said, his voice low and chillingly calm, you need to stop talking, right now. I continued reading. Victor Delgado operates a criminal organization that facilitates illegal border crossings for cartel associates, helps establish criminal enterprises in American cities, and bribes federal law enforcement officers. Over the past year, his organization has helped at least 37 wanted criminals enter the United States illegally. Elias Cortez was moving toward me, his hand inside his jacket, but I wasn't finished. I have spent the past 3 months gathering evidence of these crimes, including financial records, recorded conversations, and photographic documentation. All of this evidence has been provided to federal authorities. Victor's face had gone white. You stupid old man. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've saved my daughter's life and put you out of business. The fellowship hall erupted in chaos as Victor's associates realized they'd been trapped. But before anyone could draw a weapon or reach the exits, the doors burst open and federal agents flooded the room. FBI, nobody move. Hands where? We can see them. Agent Thompson led the tactical team, her weapon drawn and badge clearly visible. Victor Delgado, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, bribery of federal officers, money laundering, and violation of federal immigration laws. Victor stared at me with pure hatred as agents forced him to his knees and cuffed his hands behind his back. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Frank. This doesn't end here. I have associates who will be joining you in federal prison, Agent Thompson interrupted. We've been monitoring your communications for months. Simultaneous arrests are taking place in 6 states as we speak. Around the room, agents were cuffing Victor's associates and reading them their rights. The entire criminal organization was being dismantled in real time. As Victor was led away in handcuffs, he stopped next to my chair. This isn't over, old man. I'll be out eventually, and when I am... No, you won't, I said quietly. The evidence we've gathered will put you in federal prison for the rest of your life, and my daughter is safe, which means you've lost everything that mattered. Agent Thompson appeared at my elbow as the last of the criminals were led away. It's over, Frank. Maddie's waiting outside. I walked out of the church into bright sunlight and saw my daughter standing next to a federal vehicle. She was thinner than I remembered, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, but she was alive, she was free, and she was smiling. Daddy, she said, and ran to hug me. It's over, sweetheart. You're safe now. We're both safe. Thanks to you. Behind us, news vans were arriving as word spread about the arrests. Victor Delgado, the respected businessman and grieving widower, was being led away in handcuffs, while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Patricia arrived just as the last police car was leaving. She stared at Maddie in shock, then at me with something that might have been understanding. Frank, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. No, you don't. You couldn't have known. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. Agent Thompson joined us as the crowd began to disperse. Mr. Harper, we'll need you and Maddie to testify at the trial, but based on the evidence you've gathered, Victor and his associates will be facing life sentences without possibility of parole. What about the other criminals they helped cross the border? We're working with Mexican authorities to coordinate arrests. Your daughter's documentation has helped us identify and locate most of them. This operation has effectively dismantled one of the largest human trafficking networks operating along the southern border. As we walked toward our cars, Maddie took my arm. I'm proud of you, Daddy. You saved my life. You saved your own life by being smart and brave enough to gather evidence. I just helped you finish the job. The quiet, careful engineer who nobody ever noticed. Sometimes that's exactly what the job requires. 6 months later, Victor Delgado was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Elias Cortez received 45 years. The Mexican associates were either serving long sentences in American prisons or had been extradited to face charges in Mexico. The criminal network that had operated with impunity for over 2 years was completely destroyed, and the evidence Maddie and I had gathered helped federal authorities identify and arrest dozens of associated criminals across the country.